Okay, take number 54.
Whether the weather be fine or whether the weather be not. Whether the weather be cold or whether the weather be hot. Well, whether the weather, whatever the weather, whether we like it or not. Yes, I did it! Part of writing poetry is a focus on the sounds of words and the multitude of ways authors can play with them. Rhyming not only helps build rhythm, but it somehow alleviates the difficulties of memorization. It also breaks through any defensive walls a reader may subconsciously construct. I refer to it as the Mary Poppins potion of poetry. A teaspoon of sugar, well, you know. We're going to begin with alliteration. My personal preferred definition comes from AmericanRhetoric.com. The link is in the description of this video, which states, alliteration is a figure of emphasis that occurs through the repetition of initial consonant letters or sounds in two or more different words across successive sentences, clauses, or phrases. They classify this in two parts. We'll be using an excerpt from the poem Dear Wright Brothers by Advocate of Words, which showcases both types. The first type is called an immediate juxtaposition, which occurs when the second consonant sound follows right after the first. The second type is called a non-immediate juxtaposition. This occurs when the consonants occur in non-adjacent words. Which bone had to be broken to break the camel's back of your ambition? Also, the B from the middle of the word ambition complements the alliteration. If you haven't noticed, I have a lisp. Plus, I suffer slightly from dyslexia. So, to combat these challenges, I'm consistently practicing tongue twisters, which contain alliteration, such as, Sally sells seashells at the seashore, and, if I put it in my batter, it will make my batter bitter, but a bitter better butter will make my batter better. And what you heard in the opening of this episode, whether the weather be fine or whether the weather be not, whether the weather be cold or whether the weather be hot, well, whether the weather, whatever the weather, whether we like it or not. Alliteration is also referred to as a head rhyme. This is a perfect segue into the rest of our discussion of rhyming. From here on out, our focus will be on the sound at the end of words and lines. A rhyme is a repetition of similar sounding words. There is an enormous amount of ways to utilize rhyming in poetry, so we're going to cover some of the basic and most recognizable methods, but feel free to experiment and venture on your own path as well. The perfect rhyme is when two or more words rhyme in a way where their last stressed vowel and all sounds that follow are the same, such as teacher and creature, savior and behavior, friction and diction. An imperfect rhyme, also called a half rhyme, also called a near rhyme, also called a slant rhyme, has a repetition of sound in the final consonant but not in the preceding vowels or consonant, like the words bald and held, tell and told, run and moon. Assonance, sometimes also referred to as a slant rhyme as well, is when words have the same vowel sound. Examples, ball and tall, rate and take, pine and time. Consonance is when words have the same consonant sound, as in litter and batter, dawn and clown, racket and rocket. A para rhyme, also referred to as a half rhyme or a double consonance, is when different vowels appear within identical consonant pairs. This can be seen in the words block and black, rod and red, hall and hell. Identical rhyme is simple. The same word twice in the same rhyming positions. Literally the same word. Good and good, workin' and workin', justification and justification. I'm playing Captain Obvious here, ain't I? I rhymes, also known as sight or spelling rhymes, are words having the same spelling, but their sound is different. Stove and love, tough and bow, alone and gone. You still with me? I know it may seem like a lot, but chances are if you've been writing for a few years, at some point you've employed each one of these at least once. I wouldn't go as far as to say memorizing all of this is truly critical, but these could be very useful tools for your writing and reading. At the very least, use them in prompts and challenges. In the final segment of this episode, we're going to briefly discuss a few rhyming positions. The end rhyme, also known as a tail rhyme, is the rhyming of the final syllable of a line. I walked out the door to go to the store, thinking it was my last chore, but I actually had more. This is a silly example I just wrote for this, but it obviously points out the rhymes appear at the tail end of the lines. An internal rhyme is when a word at the end of a line rhymes with another word in the same line. They insisted I take a much-needed break, and to consider it for my sanity's sake. Again, a silly example I conjured up, though. It showcases the internal rhyme of take and break, which both words appear in the same line. A monorhyme is the utilization of only one repeating end rhyme in a stanza. This is not exclusive to a 2-line stanza. You could have 8 lines in a stanza, all sharing the same rhyme, and that would still be called a monorhyme. The example we used for end rhymes is also considered a monorhyme. Last, and in my opinion the most difficult and probably the least attempted, is the holorhyme. This is when all the words of 2 entire lines rhyme. An example, for ice cream, and an excerpt from Miles Kington's poem, A Lowland Holiday Ends in Enjoyable Inactivity. In Ayrshire Hill areas, a cruise, alas? Inertia, hilarious, a cruise, alas. If you've gotten to the end of this video and you've been watching this series from episode 1, you deserve a heads up. Before I give it to you, be a pal and share Poetry Defined. I'm sure you've already liked and subscribed. Now it's time for you to play the peer pressure card with your buddies. Okay, all jokes aside, the following episode will be our first of a new series within this series, Rituals, where we discuss healthy writing practices and routines, we share other great resources for poetry, and we give you some writing prompts. At this point, I'd say we have our cornerstone in place. There is more of a foundation to be built, but this journey of ours is about to pick up the pace just a little bit. So stay connected, and as always, we thank you for watching Poetry Defined. Clear up some confusion. If you write a poem with a pattern never seen before, it is not a free verse. You've simply created a unique pattern, to which I said we'll be using some of our previous episodes to create writing prompts, mention great resources for poetry, and discuss some healthy routines for creative authors